Welcome to The Perspective. My name is Patrick Barclay, and I don't know why I had to consult my notes before saying that. But I wouldn't say we're broadsheet or upmarket or anything, but we don't encourage whooping. Our very first guests are among the best brains in the football media. Kelly Cates presents on Sky Sports and BBC Radio. She was born into football. She has a brother, Paul Dalgleish, who began his career at Newcastle and went on to play for too many clubs to mention in England, in Scotland, and in America. Kelly, is he still managing out in America, or?
He's the president of the other Miami club, not the Beckham one.
Not the Beckham one.
Yeah, but they're more of they see themselves very much as a community club, and that's so he's president and he's sort of general manager, managing the team at the moment. So it's that kind of setup. But yeah, they won last night. Yeah.
Well, oh, good, excellent. So a good week for the Dalgleish family. Kelly's father also played and managed. His name is Kenneth Dalgleish. Sir Kenneth. Kelly, does that allow you to use some kind of courtesy title, Meghan Markle style? You know, like are you the Duchess of Anfield?
No, although Ian Dennis, when we work on the radio together, insists on calling me Lady Kelly now, which is just like, and I still haven't worked out a comeback to it. So I just I'm letting it go until I can think of something scathing backwards. But I think it's best. I'm just mortified, so I just let it go.
Well, John, we've got more aristocracy here. We've got Jonathan Northcroft, who's as fine a writer as you'll find on the game, football correspondent of the Sunday Times. And like Kelly's, his international allegiance lies north of the border. Johnny, you're from Aberdeen, yeah?
I am indeed, yeah, from a small village near Aberdeen, but born and bred, I guess. Grew up in the golden era.
You support the Dandies, yeah?
For my sins, yeah. First
Aberdeen, by the way.
First 15 years of my life were pretty golden, and then the last, well, I'm not going to say how long, haven't been quite so good, but
don't tell me
you, team, Paddy.
Don't tell me you go back to Alex Ferguson's Aberdeen. Not that far.
My first Aberdeen manager was Billy McNeil, actually, that I remember.
Before Ferguson, yeah.
Before Fergie. I remember Fergie arriving. I remember thinking that he wasn't, he was all right, but he hadn't won the European Cup, so maybe we could do better. My dad called me a silly boy, and I remember the billboards in the centre of Aberdeen when he left for Manchester United. It was sort of breaking news one day, and thinking back, that was a moment everything changed for the football club. But too young to imagine that. Like I remember people seeing the headlines and kind of murmur in the shoppers outside Marks and Spencer's, Union Street.
Yeah, well, as a Dundee supporter, I'm not taking your weeping and wailing. Which brings us to Omar Garrick. Hi, Omar. Omar Garrick is a rising star of the sports media, and The Perspective is very much his baby. So, Dad, get us underway.
So, we're going to have a bit of a Scottish theme to start off with, seeing as everybody here, excluding me, has some bits of Scottish in them. So we are going to be touching on the progress of Steve Clarke and whether you think there has been progress in the Scottish national team. I'll start with you, Kelly. So he's registered 9 wins now after, the back of 2 recent draws in the World Cup qualifiers. How would you assess Scotland's progression in recent times?
Well, we've qualified for the Euros and we haven't qualified for a major tournament in such a long time. That is progress. I mean, at international management, I don't think you get any points for pretty. It's all about what you achieve. I think international football is very rarely attractive. These aren't the days of vintage Brazil. So I think that what he's had to do with the players that he has available is make Scotland very difficult to beat. I think he's done that, and that you could very easily make an argument that there've been far too many draws in there for Scotland. But I think part of that has been down to the fact struggled to find a goal scorer. Shay Adams has come in, but I mean, even he's only got 7 goals this season for Southampton. So, that lack of a goal scorer is what I think makes the difference for Scotland, because they're not a soft team. They're not easy to beat. It's just tricky to get the goal at the other end.
No, yeah. Did you watch Omar? Johnny, did you watch the the two games, our two draws, to reinforce Kelly's point, the two draws against home to Austria and away to Israel. I saw both games. What did you reckon?
Well, I watched all of the Israel game, and I was kind of flitting between England and
because your England your England obligations, shall I say?
My obligation is exactly the right word. What did I think? I mean, I'm a bit glass half full, like Kelly is. We are always going to make hard work of winning any game because of that lack of sort of firepower and creativity right at the top of the pitch. And I think to start with two draws is probably, it's disappointing. It might just cost us, but on the other hand, those are games we would have probably lost before Steve Clarke. To dig out a late equaliser against Austria and to have a bad first half in Israel, but to come back and actually probably should have won the game. I think this program. I think it would be too much of us to ask, having got the tournament, to expect to just breeze to a World Cup. And at least in every game, we're going to be competitive, and we'll be competitive against Denmark, the top team of that nation, top team of the group. So I think we're going to be tough. I think we're going to grind through that group, and the signs are we're going to fight really hard, and let's see.
But this is a question for everyone, really. What do you guys make of Steve Clarke's preferred choice of having three at the back? I mean, I've seen a few games of Scotland, and I think Scott McTominay, I know he was man of the match against Austria, and that's when you played him in midfield. Do you think that would be kind of a progression moving forward to keep him in the midfield area, or do you prefer seeing him at the back for Scotland?
Is it not a knock-on effect from having to get Tierney and Robertson, your two best players in the team? And so you want them both. You want them both down the left. Okay, Andy Robertson may play further forward, but it's about trying to get. I mean, the two best players in the team play in the same position. So suddenly everything has to shift in order to accommodate them, I think.
Yeah, I think also that's definitely true of playing to your strengths, and I think Steve Clarke's done that skillfully. And I think also, if you look at Scotland's squad, yes, we're weak in terms of strikers. Until Grant Hanley's emergence in the last couple of games as a really solid centre half, I thought we were very weak at the back as well. And yet we got loads of quite good midfield players. So it was a question of trying to get as many midfield players as possible into the team. And again, I think he's done it very skillfully. What's he called, the Man United player?
Scott
McTominay. I was going to say McManaman, but he's too old even for us.
If only.
And McTominay's played reasonably well at the back, I thought. And Tierney, I think, is superb. I don't know if you'd agree, Kelly. I mean, you put him in any position. He's just a footballer, isn't he? He's Paolo Maldini. He's Paolo McMaldini. And terrific player. And he can play outside left, as he often ends up playing for Arsenal, or he can play left centre back for Scotland, and he just looks good wherever he plays. So there are good things, and but Dominic going back into midfield was good. But I don't know if we all saw the Israel game. I would slightly disagree with Kelly that the games aren't interesting. I thought Israel were fascinating. They had the footballing centre half for a start, which was an interesting development. The experts on Sky, Kelly, and our experts, Davy Provan, I think it was, said that he lacked pace, but we didn't actually batter down on him, and he was able to play, and he was actually the playmaker, even ahead of Solomon, who's a lovely little player as well. So there was a lot of good stuff to watch in the game, and for Scotland to come so close to winning it, I'm glass half full as well. I didn't think Scotland were too bad, and if we'd had a striker, we would have finished it off. So and the Austria game was good too. They've got a centre forward.
That centre forward, he scored two, didn't he? I think. Oh, he looked really good.
6'7". He's like, he'll be the new Edin Dzeko. Honestly, he'll be in the Premier League within a year. I'm sure, absolutely sure.
We'll talk about we'll talk about England briefly as well, seeing as I'm probably the only English supporter here. How would you
bet. I'm just glad you didn't wear your shirt this time.
Yeah, I know. Oh, sorry. How would you assess England at the moment in terms of the build up to the Euros? Do you think they have a good chance of winning it in particular? I mean, they've got a great squad, but I didn't particularly agree with some of the omissions, should we say, with the recent squad. I mean, I didn't agree particularly with the omission of Trent Alexander-Arnold. I didn't think he deserved to get a place left out of the squad.
There's plenty of relieved Liverpool fans.
Yeah, and I just wasn't too sure. And I think my personal opinion on Southgate is that I do like him, but I think he sometimes is a bit negative with his tactics. I don't know what you guys think. I'll come to Jonathan because he looks like he wants to have a point on this.
He also knows it inside out.
I was going to say, I mean, I do find the Trent thing very weird because the story of Southgate's reign has been, faith in young players and nurturing them and building international careers for them. And he's done that with everyone except for Trent, it would seem to me. He's been underplayed. He hasn't really been, when he has been played, he hasn't really been allowed to use his strengths, I should say. And when he was omitted, the only real reason I could think of, I know his form hasn't been at its best, but he's still been decent enough for Liverpool. The only reason I could think of was that he was going to go three at the back and he was going to play wing backs and Reece James is maybe a more natural right wing back, and then he doesn't play three at the back. So I can't get my head around when you've got a player with that talent not trying to use him. I'd say otherwise, England have done pretty well in these two games. The progression's okay. I'm not sure about them being favourites for the Euros. To be honest, I still think the midfield's not it's not the best. It's not the most creative. And although he's got lots of great attacking players, you can't put them all on the pitch. And there's a tendency to say England are amazing. They've got all these young attackers, but you can only play 3 or 4 of them. And I do wonder. I still think Grealish is an issue for Gareth because he is not instinctively a fan of that type of player. Grealish has played so well for England that he sort of forced his way in. Of course, he's absent this time through injury, and Mount and Foden have done well. So I do wonder if Grealish is going to come back for the Euros and we're going to get one of those big national debates about whether he should play or not. But England's fine. They're better than the World Cup. I still don't see, when you watch like the Belgiums and the Frances, I still don't see them quite at that top level.
I mean, touching upon that point about Grealish you make, Jonathan. I mean, I guess, you also talked about Phil Foden, and we can also talk about James Maddison. He's had a good season at Leicester. Do you think that the England side? I'll come to you, Kelly. Do you think the English side? Do you think they have too many number 10s to actually fit into the system that Southgate plays?
I think that's one of the issues for James Maddison, particularly because that is very much his position. He's the closest to classic, and whereas the other players that you've mentioned in Grealish and Foden can move around a bit, so they're more versatile options for Gareth Southgate. But I think with England there's 2 sides to it. One is, do you want to play exciting attacking football? And England fans will say yes. And then you say, well, do you want to win things? And do you want to have a really good crack at the Euros? You say yes. And I'm not sure that sticking all those attacking, exciting players in is going to give England the best chance of winning the Euros. So I get the argument that against teams that you're expected to beat, you should put out these players and let them have a run and see what they can do. But I also think, especially this year, you have such limited time in order to coach the players, in order to work with them, that it might just be that it's pick a system, stick with it, make sure everybody knows what their job is within that, and then you're drilled for when the bigger and tougher games come along. I think that's almost certainly what the plan is. And I totally understand why England fans don't want to see it or would like to see something more exciting, but I think it's a practical decision.
Where do you stand, Kelly, on the Trent Alexander-Arnold thing? Because obviously you're a close observer and lover of all things Anfield, but have you any theory as to why Southgate's got doubts? Could it just be that England have an abundance of international candidate right backs at the moment?
might be that they want to try something a little bit more defensive. I don't think
Wan-Bissaka might be a bit more what you're
Oh no.
suggesting.
No, no, no,
Well,
no, 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 no,
but
no, no,
but it might,
no.
I was.
but it might be the that might be what they're trying. But I don't think it's any bad thing that Trent Alexander-Arnold's had a couple of weeks off. I think that's, for a player at his sort of stage of development, and having had the season that they've had and all those different kinds of things. I don't know if that's played into Gareth Southgate's thoughts, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Although I would say from the noises that have been coming out of Liverpool, just that they're confused as to why Trent Alexander-Arnold hasn't been picked or whatever.
Okay, well,
it may be that they feel that his confidence.
Can I put another theory to you and Johnny, well, everybody, about Trent Alexander-Arnold? Now, I think he's one of the best creative footballers in the country. I think he's a superb, simple passer. He doesn't flight balls, he drives them. He's got a lot of fantastic things about him. He's taken the best corner in the history of football. History's been played for 150 years, and that was the best corner against Barcelona. So he's already a phenomenon for me. However, beginning of when Aston Villa 7, Liverpool 2, it's quite simple. They played Grealish on Liverpool's weak point, which was Trent Alexander-Arnold. When I'm a Fulham fan, when we played Liverpool and could have beaten them, it was 1-1 at home. We just went zeroed straight in on both fullbacks, actually, but particularly the right back. Now, we were lucky because we had two good left-sided players, Lookman, who was playing really well at that time, who's right-footed, and the left-footed Anthony Robinson. So it was easy for Scott Parker to work that out, and that worked as well, although the goal came from the other side. But again, defensively, not the greatest player. Now, I had a theory about this 2 years ago, 18 months ago, which is that in the Euros, Trent Alexander might play central midfield for England. Is that mad, as my theories usually are?
Paddy, I don't think it's mad. I mean, Trent played there for the under-18s for Liverpool and was, the kind of number 6, ran the games. And then he went in at right back because that's where the vacancy was. He'd hardly really played there before he went in. And long term, I think that might be where his position is. I guess the problem is that Gareth can't put him in for England if he's not playing there for Liverpool. And at the moment, Liverpool need him at right back. So I think that's what it is. But look, I mentioned creativity, and I do think that's still an issue for England in the deeper areas. I think they're obviously, once they get in the final third, they've got plenty to create. But I sometimes think the passing's a bit predictable, and he, from a deeper position, offers great passing. We haven't mentioned Kyle Walker, who's actually had a real renaissance for Man City, and I watch him and I can't understand how a guy gets quicker in his 30s, but he appears to have got quicker with his recovery pace. But so look, I've got no qualms actually about Walker playing, Walker being the name on the team sheet if they're going to play 4 at the back. What I've got an issue with is that, as I said earlier, that I just don't think the rules of development have been applied to him in the way they've been applied to other younger players who've been given every chance to sort of grow as England players. Declan Rice is now a fantastic England player. When he started, I thought he was quite ordinary in his performances, and he's been able to grow. Why hasn't Gareth tried to take that talent that Trent offers and tried to develop him in the same way? I think there must be an instinctive question mark, and maybe it is that defensive element that you're talking about. But something blocking him in terms of compared to the other players in Southgate's mind.
Yep.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree with the suspects and the kind of theories as to why Trent might be defensively suspect. He's amazing going forward from every single Liverpool game I've watched. But when I've watched Liverpool games, there's such a heavy emphasis on the the wingers, and Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson always bomb forward. I mean, that's what they've been accustomed to with Jurgen Klopp's teams, and I don't think you really see that as much with the England sides. I don't think there's as much of a heavy emphasis on wingers. I think a lot of it is play through the middle, and then you get it to Harry Kane, and then he does his job. So I think the way England play doesn't actually suit Trent in playing as a right back. Touching upon Paddy's point, centre midfield, I mean, he's got a brilliant range of passing on him. And yeah, as Johnny said, he played in centre midfield for the under-18s. So yeah, I think that could be a great option. I laughed at Johnny about the Wan-Bissaka stuff because we touched about that before in discussion.
He's honestly, I mean, I'm getting old, so I'm at this stage now shouting at the TV for certain things, and he's somebody that just makes me shout at the TV when I mean, nothing, you know, he's a great tackler, but my goodness, his touch sometimes, dearie me.
No,
Ellie,
yeah.
are there any players that make you shout at the TV? Actually, it's a bit difficult. You can't do it because you're on the TV. When you're on the TV.
This season especially, I'm working on most of the games, so I'm sitting in a TV studio. There's plenty of other people around me to shout at the screen.
Good answer.
Omar, can we move on to the Premier League now? Because I knew this would happen. We'd
always talking.
The conversation would run away. But you wanted to talk about the Premier League.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Premier League now. I mean, what have we learned so far? I mean, at the top of the table is Manchester City. They've scored the most amount of goals in the Premier League. They've scored 64, and they've only conceded just 21 goals, which is the best in the Premier League as well. Do you think then, I'll come to Kelly, do you think this is due to the signing of Ruben Diaz? Do you think he's just made that much of an impact to Pep Guardiola's side?
He clearly has made a huge impact. There's an argument potentially that it's as big as the impact that was made by Van Dijk, although, you know, Manchester City already had the world-class goalkeeper in there. So it's slightly tempered by that. Also, the fact that they have a hatful of £50 million defenders in there, so they should have a decent defense. But I think you have to, you know, it's all very well and good spending the money, but you have to spend the right money and the usual thing. And I think what Ruben Diaz seems to have done is shown that the money has been spent well, because players who it seemed, like John Stones, who it seemed were kind of on their way out again, suddenly are having a renaissance. And a lot of that's down to John Stones himself, because he's gone away and worked. He's done little things like come off social media. He did a big interview with Micah Richards at the start of the season. He talked about all the focus that he's putting on working on every aspect of his game, sorting out things in his personal life, making sure that everything's clear for him just to focus. And I think then when you get a great partner alongside you, I think that everything just ticks along really nicely. So I think it is that. And Aymeric Laporte, who was, you know, Aymeric Laporte was out last season. That's the reason Manchester City fell away. Suddenly he's down the pecking order. It's just a really, but they have that City. They have someone for every position.
I think as well, what I noticed with City this season is that it's been more of a collective responsibility as opposed to relying on more individual talent. I think you've seen with a lot of the squad, they've all chipped in their certain way. So we saw Ilkay Gundogan, for example. He scored loads of goals this season, more than his previous seasons. I think also as well the rise of Phil Foden. I haven't heard much about Raheem Sterling as well as much this season.
No, Nedum, you made a really good point on this. And he was saying that he thinks that at Manchester City, that there is a certain amount of freedom in there, but Pep Guardiola has a way of playing, and he will have, and every single player knows what's expected of that position. Every single player in the squad knows what's so because they're such excellent players, they can go in and they can move around, and that, you know, we are getting close to that sort of total football experience where in Manchester City anybody can go and play anywhere because they understand what is expected of them in that position.
Yeah, I must say it is remarkable that, you know, little tweaks of position. I've never quite understood. Sorry, I've wanted to believe, but I've always been suspicious of the theory that Pep Guardiola is a genius, because often when you read
because
the
you're a
method,
contrarian, that's why.
this is absolutely right. We are taught in the profession that I followed for 40 years with curate's egg of success, but that you must challenge every theory. You're absolutely right. So consequently, even the theory that Guardiola was a genius sort of had to go under the microscope. This season has proved beyond any question that in football terms, he is a genius. He has ways of making footballers play that go far beyond their individual. Zinchenko, you watched Zinchenko. In any other club in the world, he'd be an ordinary player. Cancelo, is it? The other one?
So, yeah.
He's now a game changer, a player who almost has reinvented a position. Gundogan, you spoke about. Gundogan, you think, well, maybe a very good midfield player. Well, obviously a very good midfield player, but maybe not a great one. He's striker of the season, and people are saying, "Who is that Bernardo Silva guy? Didn't he used to play for?" I mean, it's just ridiculous the way that Guardiola gets the best out of people, but in left field ways. It has been remarkable because I probably went along with the theory that City's era of success is to do with 5 great players: Yaya Toure, Vincent Kompany for his on and off the field contribution, latterly off mainly. Kun Aguero,
Sergio Aguero, yeah, that's
and the other two, the right back,
Silva,
Zabaleta.
Yeah.
But they've all gone. David Silva, they've all gone, and still Man City are running away with the title. So you've got to say, well, maybe Pep Guardiola is a genius.
I
think you're late to that party. Fashionably late. It's fine.
Preposterously late. But yeah, Kelly, while you're there, Liverpool, what is the reason? Is it that just Man City have gone up a gear? Is it that Liverpool have had a lot of injuries? Is it that you can't win the league every year? Why are Liverpool not in the challenging pack?
Lots of reasons.
Title?
I mean, I don't. There isn't a pithy answer to it, unfortunately. It's
give us a long one then.
Okay, well, injuries is massive. They've been affected more per minute, more per senior player, more per squad member than any other team. I mean, all the numbers on injuries suggest that. So they have been hugely affected by that. You point at, well, Van Dijk was there for the Villa 7-2, but Alisson was out. So they've had this kind of makeshift defence for a large part of the season. Whoever's out, whether it's the goalkeeper or one of the many centre-backs have been missing, whether it's Van Dijk or Gomez or Matip, or then it was Fabinho, who was a standing centre-back, and then he got injured, and then now Jordan Henderson's been standing in at centre-back, and then he's out. And it's just one thing after. There was Kabak, I think, took a knock as well a couple of weeks. It's just been silly. The knock-on effect to that is, which may well come back to our England conversation, is that you then, James Milner got an injury as well. So you then can't start to move your wing backs or your full backs around, You can't start to give them a little bit of a break. And they're playing this really intensive sort of pandemic football season. So there's that. Then you get Jota out, which means that you can't rotate any of the front three, which means then they start to look really leggy. And your midfield lacks because you've got your most important midfielders or your sort of steadiest tempo setting midfielders in the center of your defense. So you've got Thiago playing out of position. So I mean, it's all these things knock on. It's like, you've met everyone connected by a piece of string. You pull one and the whole thing can kind of collapse. There's that. I think it's also the case that we talked about Manchester City there and the fact that they're running away with it this season. And that's no coincidence. I think they are absolutely set up for this kind of season, because I think they are ice and Klopp's Liverpool are fire. And I think, it's not that one is necessarily better than the other, but City are cool heads, absolutely everything done in exactly the right way. Whereas Klopp's, it's not the heavy metal football that it used to be. It's not got that chaotic element. And actually, maybe under the circumstances, then a bit of that needs to come in. When you when chaos visits you, sort of embrace it. But I think that there is that sense of harnessing all the energy. I do, and I think, you know, we saw City as soon as they lost ground on Liverpool to the point where it looked unlikely last season. It just kind of they just drifted, you know, in the league towards the end of the season. I think there's an element of that which is understandable. But I also think as well, you know, there's the stuff that's affecting everybody, the kind of, you know, the pandemic, the fact that we all feel a bit miserable and fed up at times. So we're seeing that in a lot of teams' performances. Nobody's really consistent apart from City. And that's really only since after the first few weeks of the season. But also, I think that there was that high for Liverpool of winning the season, winning the title, and winning it in the way that they did. And it was done before the pandemic, before lockdown even hit.
Yes.
Winning it the way they did. They then have that moment of lifting the trophy, which was done as well as it could be. And they were clearly delighted, and it was very exciting. But then you go back and you get a little taste every now and again of a couple of thousand fans coming in at a push. And they don't have that moment. They don't have that time. And because it's such a collective, because it is all fire, then there must necessarily be a crash in a human being for that. You know, they must just have that. And they're thinking, well, next time we play in front of fans, we're not going to be champions anymore. And if so many fans of rival clubs are like, do you know what? If they could win any season, this is the one we'd want, because they've not been able to enjoy it. And it's true. They haven't been. So they're just going to have to win the Champions League.
And you'd never rule Liverpool out of the Champions League. Johnny.
I was just going to say some really interesting points you raised there, Kelly, regarding, because I saw this argument that was from Jamie Carragher, and he said that squad has been with each other for so long, and there hasn't really been a sort of refreshment inside the squad. So with that, I mean, David Ornstein just reported, I think it was about a few hours ago, that Liverpool are in advanced talks with Ibrahim Konate, RB Leipzig centre-back. Where do you think Liverpool need to strengthen in the summer? Do you think there needs to be a massive overhaul of players, or do you think
now they have a glut of centre-halves, don't they?
I know.
They brought a lot of people in on loan, people, and I don't know, does that mean that they're not going to go for Kabak long term? I don't, because, you know, I don't think he's done a bad job in this. It's hard to tell at the moment. It's hard to kind of judge him fairly, I think, at the moment. But
I mean, Johnny's just shaking his head at Kabak, but in a very firm way that brooks no further argument. But do Liverpool, Johnny, are Liverpool one of those teams that really need? And on a second question, if I may, well, I may, because it's half my podcast.
You may.
Do you not think Thiago Alcantara is the most overrated footballer on the planet?
No, I don't actually. No, I think Thiago's a lovely footballer.
He's not bad, but they talk about him as if he's something special, and he never was and never will be.
Paddy, I'm loving this. So Thiago's ordinary and Guardiola's not much of a football figure.
I'm not saying ordinary. I'm just saying I think he's a top player. You don't play for Bayern and Liverpool if you're not a top player. Of course he's a top player, but he's not a game changer. He's not better than Jordan Henderson. He's not. In fact, he's not as good as Jordan Henderson. He's not nowhere near as good as, in my opinion. He's not as good as Jordan Henderson, and he's not really. I know he's different from Wijnaldum, but he's not really a more intelligent player than Wijnaldum. He keeps the game going. He's a wee bit like that fella Moussa Dembele, who played for years Spurs, and
he was fantastic, by the way.
A beautiful player, a beautiful player. It's, I mean, sheer quality. I mean, you watch him, but he doesn't actually do very much.
I think the thing with Thiago,
look beautiful.
I think the thing with Thiago Alcantara is that I personally think he is a world-class midfielder. I think his passing range. I mean, he was part of the treble team with Bayern. I mean, that says something in itself. But I think the problem is, Patrick. I think the problem is that he doesn't suit Liverpool's style of play. I think the way Liverpool play, they play on the front foot normally with the Gergen press and whatnot. And Thiago, he seems to slow the tempo down. And I think that's the reason why we haven't seen the best of him in the Premier League this season.
All through Thiago's career, Thiago's career, he's played against teams that are not as good as his team.
But that's because he's played for the best teams.
That's because he's brilliant.
That's true of all the best players.
No,
that's true of all the best players.
No, it's not. It's simply not. I can give you plenty of examples of people to whom that doesn't apply, starting with Diego Maradona. But there are millions of others. But no, he has played for those two teams. I'm not saying he's a bad player. All I'm saying is that the English league is a very different medium in which at least 50% of the games are intensely competitive. Whereas the leagues that previously Thiago played in, they're more like 80 to 90% not competitive. That's all.
Well, is the issue with Thiago not that it's taken Liverpool until this point of the season to pair him and Fabinho in midfield, to put two centre-backs together and to streamline the game? And I think we've been quite kind to Klopp and chatting about Liverpool, but I do think, and I much as I admire him, just can't question him, but he hasn't got this season right. And it's hindsight. This is hindsight talking, because when Fabinho moved to the centre-back, he was fantastic. And I just don't think Klopp realised exactly what he was losing out of the spine of the team, out of the midfield. And now you see Fabinho back at the base of the midfield, giving such a platform that the guys in front of him can play. That's perfect for Thiago now. That combination and blend looks wonderful. I think Thiago's just a superb player with the range of passing Omar was talking about. He reminds me of John Collins, actually, which is high praise. And I kind of know what you're saying in the sense that, Paddy, that he doesn't provide the assist, he doesn't provide the final ball, and he's not, he's not a dominant player in the way that maybe Fabinho is. He's a bit of everything, but he's a beautiful, wonderful bit of everything who doesn't waste a pass, who's got an ability.
No, that's true.
Disguise and choose a pass.
A much-needed dose of, dare I say it, perspective and erudition from Mr. Northcroft, but that's why we're paying him so much. So, Omar, we need to push on because...
Shall we move on? I want to talk about Spurs at the moment, and in particular, the situation with Harry Kane. I mean, there's been numerous reports suggesting that Harry Kane wants to leave Spurs, but he's going to have this huge price tag on him of, they say, between 120 to 150 million pounds that Daniel Levy will demand. Jonathan, what do you think about the situation of Harry Kane? Do you think he should move elsewhere?
I mean, the should move is a difficult one, because that's something only Harry Kane really knows, and it's that dilemma, I guess, that Steven Gerrard had to a certain extent. Do you stay and be the one club man, the legend, or do you move in order to maximise your trophy winning power? And Steven actually was able to win trophies for Liverpool, so Kane's not even close to that. I was one of the Sunday journalists who spoke to Harry last week, where he opened that door again in terms of the dilemma he's got in the summer. And it was quite careful and clever what he said. I think he wanted to make sure that he didn't cause too much controversy, but he did let people know that he is thinking about his future and that this summer will be the point. And I think it's clear that if he wants to end the career with what he could do in terms of winning, sorry Spurs fans, but he will have to leave. History tells you that. And Spurs aren't any closer now to winning a trophy than they were 3 or 4 years ago. In fact, they're further away as far as I can see it. He would cost a lot, but he's in tremendous shape. We spoke about Robert Lewandowski and his productivity in his late 20s and early 30s. So Kane's still got all of those years ahead of him. And at 120 million, I would say that if you can't get Mbappe and Haaland, you go for Harry Kane. And I was wondering, Omar, if your club would be the natural fit. There's something about Kane to Manchester United that does make sense.
Yeah.
You could buy Harry Kane. You could bank on him for at least 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Let's say, and hopefully 4 or 5 if his body stays the ankles. And at this point in time, apart from Lewandowski, he's the most complete number 9 in the game. I think Haaland and Mbappe are the coming men. But in terms of right here, right now, I don't see anyone apart from Lewandowski who offers as much as Kane does in that role.
No, yeah. I mean, in touching upon the Manchester United thing, I think he would suit our system. We're crying out for a number 9. We've been linked to Haaland because obviously he worked with Solskjaer at Mulder, but he would cost in the region between 150. They're saying 150 million pounds, and think about all the competition that's going to come for Haaland. Let's talk about Real Madrid, Chelsea, and to be honest with you, Jonathan, I don't think our owners would spend that much money on the player. I mean, that Ed Woodward has come out and said that we're tight, we're working in the pandemic. So I think he's given all the indications that the budget is going to be restricted. And I think with that, I don't think, I mean, on the back of last summer, we saw the whole Jadon Sancho situation. That tired me out as a fan, because there was just up and down a roller coaster of emotions. And I think that's the same with a lot of United fans now, to be honest. I think they've just given up on having some sort of hope in the transfer market, because there's so many positions that we need to focus on, but I don't think we're going to be able to do it all in one go. But yeah, touching back on Spurs, I'll come to Kelly with this. How would you assess Jose Mourinho's season at Tottenham so far? I'm going to give you an easy question.
I will come to that. Can I say just quickly on Harry Kane as well, though? I think there's a human aspect to this. Harry Kane turns 28 this summer, and I think he's given every indication that he would like to go and win trophies, and he thinks that, without saying it, he has hinted that this is going to have to happen away from Spurs. That's what he wants from his career. I think he's given so much to Tottenham. I don't think they'd be obviously devastated if he left, and presumably there'd be some who would be furious. I think that would be unfair on him. I think he's given so much. He's waited, and he's now waited. There's been a pandemic in the middle of it. If he doesn't move this summer, next summer he's 29, and suddenly that will disappear. If his path is blocked for reasons of pettiness or quibbling over contracts or fees, I think that would be on a human level. The business side of it is not my forte at all, and I get that. But I just think on a human level, I think that'd be a real shame for him.
Who would buy him then? Who would buy Harry Kane then?
But I think, I mean, because Barca, and he's more a Madrid player than a Barca player anyway. And Barca don't have any money.
Barca skint, I think.
Yeah, they have no money at all. And then Real Madrid was supposed not to have any money, but I think they might just manage to.
They always find it.
They'll find it. Yeah, they'll find a bit down the back of the sofa. Yeah. I mean, Man United football-wise feels like a really good fit, like you're saying. He'd be brilliant at City. He just, I mean, especially for Aguero. And Aguero's contract's up. He's not really played much this season. He'd fit at City. They've got the money for him. Would they spend it on him, or would they go and spend the same money on a player who they'd get a lot longer out of? That's the problem. Because he's now at that age already. That's why I'm saying another year would be a nightmare, because already he's at that age where people are going, oh, do we? And he has had injuries. You know, he's not, a machine. So that was all I would say.
We haven't mentioned. Sorry, Kelly, you're still talking about.
No. Sorry, I was only going back to Omar's question. That was all.
Yes. No, sorry. I beg your pardon. What was your question?
Yes.
Repeat your
on
question.
Mourinho.
That was on Mourinho. Yeah. How would you assess his season? Because we saw the kind of calamity in Europe with the loss to Dinamo Zagreb. I mean, that was awful, wasn't it? I mean, the way they.
But everybody's had awful nights in Europe this season, I think, pretty much. And I think but this is what Mourinho sells himself on. This is who he is. He gets to these stage of competitions if he was giving an interview to a prospective employer, he would say, this is what I do. I get to this stage of the competition. And having got themselves 2-0 up from the first leg, that is not in Mourinho's it's not in his CV to let that go, if you understand what I mean, rather than what actually happens under him. But I think it's been a Mourinho kind of season. I think it's promised a lot, not quite delivered. People seem upset and unhappy. The dressing room seems disjointed. There seems to be there isn't too much. There seem to be sort of pointed comments towards the owner and board rather than full on warfare. Not yet. That's still up the sleeves. The fans haven't been in, so there's no kind of conflict between them at the moment. I just think it's been everything that we thought it would be under Mourinho. There've been the rows, there've been the press conferences, there've been the post-match interviews, there've been the players who are absolutely devastated. There have been the players who've been bombed out. There have been the sort of Dele Alli moments. Everything. We knew this was coming. I don't think any of it's a surprise.
Ronnie?
No, that's it. There's that Jose trajectory, isn't there, where it starts off in a forward direction, and then there's a setback, and then things start to explode. And it just seems that during his career, that cycle gets quicker and quicker, and it's happened really fast in front of us at Spurs. He could still win a trophy this season. It'd be a big ask to beat Man City, but he could do it. So, Harry Kane was saying last week that it is too early to say this has been the disaster. And I do get that. But do I expect him to win the trophy? Do I expect him to finish in the top four? No. And if they don't, do I expect him to stay? I don't. And there are signs that, what happens to Jose when he gets in these situations is he starts to think about his own reputation and starts to, I guess, blame others. And you can see a few signs of that in I thought the post-match press conference in Zagreb was signs of that. And you get this kind of bitter end game. So, after that cup final, shall we say, if they haven't made an impression in the top four and they lose that cup final, we might see a month of sort of carnage at Spurs before the inevitable exit.
After Mourinho, nothing makes eyes roll more reliably than VAR. Omar has a brilliant quote on VAR, which I would like him to.
I've been waiting to share this with all of you. So it was, you might have seen it. So it was a quote from an article that Ollie Holt wrote in the Daily Mail. It was a wonderful interview with Michael Oliver. So this is what he said. Well, this is just the pull-out quote that I found. So he said, if you scrapped it tomorrow lunchtime, all you would hear all weekend would be people shouting, that would be a pen on VAR. So, do you think then, I will ask Johnny first, do you think that we are not used to VAR in our lives and that's why there's so much scrutiny around it?
Probably. There's also always been scrutiny, as Michael Oliver sort of touches on, there was refereeing debate before VAR. Now this refereeing debate, and if you took it away, there'd still be refereeing debate. So I get all that. I just think that the biggest problem is it's been applied pretty badly in England. Yes. It's been applied almost like on a kind of month by month basis, where they're always reacting to the last set of complaints and gripes from clubs or fans, and it just seems very, very sort of weak, really, and as I say, reactive. And I know there's been controversies in other countries, but when you watch like the Champions League and the European competitions, even the FIFA World Club Championship that I was at with Liverpool, there's just less fuss. There's no kind of big pantomime of the lines on the screen. And maybe it's a presentational thing. There's a VAR check in progress. The message is up on the stadium screen, and you get the result without this big drama. And when it's like that, I just think there's a lot more logic to it. Coupled with, I have to say, the person that gets off scot-free in all of this is David Ellery, and the number of little adjustments to the rules with penalties, handballs, offsides, and so on at IFAB, that's also played a big part in it. There's been, I saw a figure recently, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's been more rule changes, minor rule changes in the last 10 years than in the previous 100, and that's also an issue. So VAR gets blamed really for these minute changes in the rules that none of us can really understand. What is the current state of play with handball? I don't know.
But I tell you the issue is that it's a bit like lockdown. You announce that a change is going to come in the future, and everybody starts altering their behaviour in the meantime. It's exactly what's happened. So all the interpretations have changed as well. I think the VAR, all for referees being given more assistance. That's what referees wanted. We want more assistance. VAR is as well as an on-field referee, not instead of an on-field referee. I think what it's highlighted is that the laws of the game, as Jonathan says, are ludicrous and pretty much not fit for purpose. I think they are far too complex. They are. It's not going to happen that everybody goes back to the drawing board, scraps them and starts again. That's not going to happen. What will happen is there will be layer upon layer upon layer of addendums to all these different laws, which is just going to make everything. Then on top of that, you get all the advice that they're given. But what I think there is absolutely no excuse for are the times when referees this season, and it's happened not lots of times, but on the occasions when it has done, and you asked me earlier which player makes me scream at the telly, is when referees get the laws of the game wrong, and not some kind of interpretation, not one of those decisions that's open to kind of scrutiny, or you can argue both sides of. They get things wrong, and you think the one that really got to me was when Villa played Man City, and there was the goal, and was it Gundogan came back, and anyway. Scored the goal, came from an offside position, scored the goal. And everybody who has watched football forever looked at it and thought, that's offside. And then afterwards, I think it was PGMOL sent a sort of mail shot out, and everybody got explained to them that this is because X, Y, and Z, and this application of law, and that is by the letter of the law correct. And everybody went, well, okay, it doesn't feel instinctively right, but we understand, absolutely, completely accept. Then happened in the same game. It worked in Aston Villa's favour when they played against Newcastle. It was Fabian Schär was coming back from an offside position the very next game. And afterwards, I was working on both those games, which is why I feel the sting particularly. We all sort of explained it, and we went, well, obviously we know what that is because it happened to Aston Villa in the last game. Now it's evened itself out. It's gone in their favour. Within a couple of days, whole news statement goes out saying we've changed the rules. We are now advising referees differently. And you think, but I tell you what, don't make mugs of everybody. Just pick something, stick to it, tell everybody what it is, and make them stick to it. That's all we want.
The law changes. I mean, they've varied. An awful lot of law changes have gone on, which have actually been very beneficial, and we don't notice them. I mean, 20 years ago, you'd get 15 to 20 offsides in a game. Now you might get 1, 2, or 3. I mean, that's an exaggeration and a generalization, but by and large, it is true. The game flows much better than it did 20 or 30 years ago. The offside law has been, in my opinion, consistently improved for positive reasons up until VAR, where suddenly everyone's turned into a traffic warden of the worst kind, desperately looking for a reason to chalk off a great goal. How John McGinn got that one against Austria.
It was his backside. If he'd been facing the other way, it was because it wasn't. Sorry, because it wasn't. Everybody's like, but it's
the only time it's worked on the side of the gods. But
I remember IFAB saying when it first came out, the advice was that you wouldn't look at offsides unless, again, it looked like it was a clear and obvious error.
Correct. That's the way it should be.
All this bringing in of the lines isn't necessary.
No. Lines are not
people
movable.
understand.
Lines are not part of the game.
But also, I think I get it that on or offside is a binary decision. So you bring in technology.
Yeah.
Technology is not up to scratch with the precision of the decision.
No.
So if your technology was absolutely precise and you could be absolutely sure, fine, no issue with it, no issue with the lines. But the technology isn't. It isn't precise.
Exactly.
You don't know this exact moment someone touches the ball and whether. So it's not. My issue isn't that you make it a binary decision, because it is. My issue is that you've got to use the technology that you've got as best you can, and I don't think that's best use.
No, I think we need. My personal view is we need less of it. I mean, Jonathan mentioned David Ellery, who is very, very influential on the laws, and often, to his credit, I think the implementation, particularly in this country, of VAR has been unforgivably bad. Unforgivably because there were loads of trials. It's not as if, oh, we'll suck it and see. You know, if it works well, we'll do this. You know, it's not the bloody pandemic. It's not something that we didn't see coming. It's something we deliberately introduced to the game after lots of trials. And moreover, not only in football, we were able to learn lessons supposedly from cricket, from rugby league initially, from rugby union, and all the other sports that have it. And yet still we've managed to bring it in as if it had never been heard of before. And I rang David Ellery because it was something I wrote about many years ago when Kelly wasn't even born and when nobody else was talking about it. And it was something that I felt was coming, and I really wanted, but I did not want this. And I rang Ellery and I said, look, we are used to a referee getting assistance. It's just not video assistance. It's a linesman, a lines person. You know, in those days they were called linesmen. With a flag who does, as one once did at Wigan and said, Wayne Rooney just nutted this guy, you better send him off, and they send Wayne Rooney off at Wigan. And everybody knows that, yeah, the linesman saw it, so the referee takes his view on it. The same thing must happen. And I said, David, all you need to do is make the same thing happen. Do not involve the fans. That's the last thing you want to do, because that restores home advantage to grounds. We will then have the kind of home advantage that we don't have now during the pandemic, but which in football 40, 50 years ago, if you were playing at home, you were probably won because the referee was swayed. We worked years and years and years to bring in professional referees to make home advantage less of a cheaty thing, to be quite honest. And I'm not just talking about England winning the World Cup. There were other instances, but we will, if we persist with this business of referees going over to look at a screen at a ground at which there is a 50,000 rabid one-directional crowd, we will restore home advantage. I can absolutely promise you of that, and not in a good way. So there are lots of reasons why it should be done quietly. Now, the Stockley Park, having it away from the ground is great, but only if that guy makes the decision. If he quietly says to the referee, Fred or Frida, you have got this completely wrong. That was 8 yards offside. The referee, knowing that the fourth official in Stockley Park is of equal status to him or her, takes her word his word in the same way as the linesman with the flag says, Wayne Rooney nutted that guy, you better send him off. Simple as that. End of any other involvement in VAR. That's what I told Ellery 12 years ago, and he was so impressed that he completely ignored
it. I think also as well, the problem that I've had with VAR is just a lot of the decisions in general have been wrong. I can touch upon Thomas Souček, the red card against Fulham. How on earth was that a red card? And then also as well the Callum Hudson.
How can a decision be overturned when you've got VAR? VAR should be the panel.
Yeah.
That should you shouldn't need it.
Absolutely.
It should be maybe one at most, one or two at most across the season. And there's not been that many more, to be honest. But
there have also been decisions which have been made as a result of laws which have been brought in purely because, for example, the ridiculous one that a goal can't be scored after an accidental handball. That's
changing though, isn't it? That's the one that's
now
changing.
changed. That's now changed, but it was brought in. It was I know it was popular because I said it was ludicrous on Twitter, and I got pelters from people saying, "How can a goal be scored off?" I mean, there are a lot of
wasn't it that went in when he was sliding in with his hand.
It was the Wolves one, Bolly, and he tried to head it, got it, and it skidded off his head, hit his arm, which was down there to break his fall, and bounced into the net. Now, maybe that's ugly. Maybe it's anomalous. Maybe somebody at FIFA doesn't like it, but it's a goal because anywhere else on the field, it's not a foul. So there's no sphere, not only of sport in legislature, but of law anywhere in the world that makes a thing right just because of a consequence that wasn't foreseen. It was just
It's all
nutty.
reactive.
And
It's so
the fact that it
reactive.
was brought in, I mean, luckily they realized it's nuts and they've abolished it. But how on earth could that have been brought in? That's what worried me. Anyway, sorry, I'm starting to rant. So, Omar,
Yeah, let's.
what's next on the agenda?
So let's move on to the guest section. So this is going to be about you guys. So I will start with Jonathan. I will start with you. When was your breakthrough in journalism, and when did you decide you wanted to become a writer?
Next week.
Well, yeah, very good. It's a good one. I mean, my mother would tell you. So when I was like 7 years old, I wrote this sort of 36-page short story for my teacher about the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, and a caterpillar that had 36 legs and football boots, going and playing for Scotland and basically teaming up with Archie Gemmell and winning us the World Cup. And she always says, "Oh, we knew then that you were going to be a football writer." I don't know that consciously. I think it was a lot later than that. Probably, I don't know. I wanted to be a footballer. I wasn't good enough. Probably 16, 17, starting to think about what else I could do. I always loved English. I always loved writing, and loved my football. So it was a natural sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just kind of feel like I've kind of drifted into it. Really, maybe everyone, actually probably almost generation, because it's just a lot more difficult and expensive to go to uni and all that kind of stuff. Have to think harder about it. It was a bit easier back in the day. But yeah, I feel like I kind of drifted into it. I started up in Glasgow, doing sort of freelance stuff for magazines. Round about 93, 94, when Saturday Comes was my first sort of place that published me and actually paid me for it, which was incredible.
Barney Rooney as well came out of that, didn't he?
Is that right? Well, there you
I
go.
think so, yeah.
They produced one good one then, didn't they? I did a bit of work for a sports agency up there. My first match report, I think, was on Airdrie versus Ayr United. 200 words for a whole lot of local newspapers. I used to report for CFAX when I did that job. And then started with the Glasgow Herald, actually, as a news journalist. I wanted to, sport was what I wanted to do, but I got offered a news job, and I'm so glad I took it, because I think the heart of what we do is still reporting, and it was a good grounding, just a good experience in terms of learning how to report news, which I think you can apply to anything, whether it's a feature or a match report. So those were the early days back in the pre-internet, pre-mobile phones, prehistoric times, and just drifted on from there.
Who did you take over from on the Sunday Times? Was it Joe Lovejoy?
It was, ultimately as football correspondent. But I got my break, and so I was working as a Scottish correspondent for the Sunday Times, Scottish football correspondent from 98, and then I got my big break in England. There were two reasons. One was the 1999 European Cup final and Manchester United Bayern Munich, and I wrote a piece about Aberdeen v Bayern Munich and Fergie's first encounter, which I was there as a kid at Pittodrie. And I spoke to the old players, and I reconstructed that triumph. And the sports editor in London really liked it, so he kind of, I guess, was keeping an eye on me from there. And then a couple of years later, Joe Lovejoy was banned for life by Fergie for taking liberties in Fergie's mind at a press conference, and they needed to. I guess they needed the sort of sacrificial lamb for Fergie, and they got a young Aberdeen fan to come down and report Manchester United. And I reported on, my job was actually the northwest of England, so I had Man United, Liverpool, Everton, and City weren't really on the radar at that point. It was Bolton and Blackburn.
Would Leeds have been in the Premier League?
Leeds were, but they were sort of just
Northeast.
from they were kind of unclaimed, really. They always are from a geographical position. Sometimes the northeast correspondent does it. Sometimes it's a north of England man. But it was brilliant, and I had Walter Smith at at Everton, I had Gary Mack at Liverpool, and I had Fergie sitting there at United, and it was the right time for a Scot to sort of come down and try and make their way, and just a brilliant era as well, because you had Arsenal's Invincibles on the rise, and you had that great Liverpool team on the rise, and United were. My first season actually was that season where Laurent Blanc arrived, and everything started to fall apart for United, which was fantastic to report on, really, because it was just so many stories. So yeah, good times.
Well, if you can ever recollect that caterpillar story, I would love to hear it sometime, because that does sound like a wonderful.
I'm sure my mum's got it. Best thing I ever wrote.
There is a very sad. Before we move on to Kelly, there is actually a sad postscript to the caterpillar with 32 legs story. He was going to play for Scotland in the World Cup, but in fact he had to retire because he couldn't get a boot deal. Anyway, Kelly.
Yeah, so we'll come to Kelly. Kelly, you've had a wonderful career in broadcast television. You've done loads of jobs, from working at Virgin to Santanta Sports. I remember that when I was a child. But to now back at Sky Sports. but the one thing I wanted to ask you really was that, because your father was such a public figure, I think with that, a lot of you're open to scrutiny when you're such a well-known individual to the public. Did that ever kind of did you see that as an obstacle, really, when you were trying to pursue a career in the media, and knowing the media was such a profession that has the opportunity to create so much scrutiny to you? Was you ever worried about that?
When I started out and I was 22 and I went to work at Sky Sports News, we broadcast to the building. So I mean, it was a very small amount of scrutiny, but I think, and I just kind of tripped in, sort of thinking, yes, somebody's seen something in me, I've been plucked to go and kind of, go be a television star. But no, it wasn't like that. I had Sky Sports News was starting off and everybody was brand new. And it was one of those rare opportunities where everything just falls into place. They just hired a load of us, a load of kids, and just went, go and make telly, go and practice. And nobody's going to be watching at the beginning. So make as many mistakes as you like. And you just don't get that kind of opportunity. Although I do think people don't talk about luck enough and timing when they talk about their own careers, because there's plenty of people who work hard and it doesn't work out for them. It's not down just to hard work. That's the basic. And then on top of that, you need luck, and you need to kind of accept that there's an element of chance in all of this, and it just comes down to somebody else's opinion. But in terms of the sort of scrutiny of it, I think probably because I'm always going to be the least well-known person in my family. It doesn't bother me. It just doesn't bother me. It isn't something that I like. It isn't something that I look for. It isn't something that kind of matters to me, or I think it's important. In fact, the opposite. I think it's a horrible thing to be well-known. So I just don't. I think being known in your field and being respected in your industry is one thing, but being known outside of that, it's essentially meaningless.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not terrible. I mean, on the other hand, if people say nice things about me, I'm very grateful. I didn't mean it to sound like that. But what I meant was it shouldn't ever be something that drives you. I don't think, because you'll be miserable if it is.
And with that, Kelly, what do you think has been so far in your career the most challenging obstacle you've had to face as like life in such a public figure role?
In that sense, you mean, in terms of feeling like I was exposed, or that I was
so
just because of the job,
so with the job that you do, but you're such a well-known individual to all of us who watch football and stuff. Has there ever been like a challenging scenario where you've had to deal with, or if you ever had a period in your career where you thought, I want to give up on this,
No, I never wanted to give up. There've definitely been dips and quieter moments. I mean, really, it's the classic. It's around my kids being really tiny, and when I had my daughters, then there was a natural sort of dip and quiet spot in my career because I wanted to spend more time with them. But I always kind of kept my hand in throughout that time and took jobs. And I think that's the thing I would say to anybody: just take stuff. If people offer you work, take it, because these are, it might not be exactly what you want at that moment, but it might lead to something, but also it just keeps you and your brain ticking over and keeps you involved and keeps you sort of thinking in a work way rather than completely sort of switching off from it. So there's so many things I've done where I've thought, I don't think I really want to do this, and then I've done it and I've loved it. I went and covered the America's Cup for Sky. I said, you do realise I know nothing about sailing? And they said, well, no, that's fine. We just want you to be one step ahead of the viewer. And I thought, oh my God, more than that. So off I went to Valencia for 3 months and had an absolute ball. And by the end of it, I was chasing this sort of head of one of the teams down the street, talking about some obscure piece of kit on the top of the mast that kind of that was some sort of investigation, and say, did you do this? Did you know that this was this? But you throw yourself into it and you become really involved, and that's part of it. That's a lot of the fun of it as well. Take the stuff you think you're not going to like or that isn't going to be useful, because most of the time you'll love it.
I have to ask you one personal question of mine, and it's about the incident when it was at St Mary's when Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher walked away from you in that massive strut. Was that unintentional then when that happened?
Complete. Yeah, because I mean, obviously they are both consummate broadcasters and professionals, but we sort of, the Fridays we don't rehearse particularly strictly because they're quite sort of relaxed. And the conversation we'd had about it was, I'll ask you a question, so you're not just walking and kind of just like walking. I said, I'll ask you a question to send you on your way so you can have a conversation on your walk. And I asked the question, and I think it was Gary heard the director saying, okay, you're free to go now, but just took that as a cue, as in, don't bother answering the question. So they got turned. But the worst thing was that I'm in shot the whole of the way around. So all I can hear, everybody's just creasing up in my ear, just like trying to, and going, yeah, Kel, we can still see you, still see you. Yeah, no, it's still there. And I just kind of kept shifting a little bit, just kind of go, oh, I don't really know. Anyway, and then they went down. So I didn't think anything of it until the next day. It got kind of picked up on as this is how women in football are treated, and this is, and I was like, there are definitely topics around this to be discussed, but I really don't think this is the best illustration of it. I really don't. I get on so well with them, and they're not like that, and I felt terrible because I was like, that is not the thing to pin on them. Definitely not.
Oh yeah.
So whose choice was it to do because I know Sky with you?
That was the promo department came, and I was like, and I thought, the sort of response thing, and they said, we're going to do this thing, and we'll ask about the Manchester derby, and you say, don't turn your back on it and turn around. And I thought, oh God, no. I thought everybody's going to be sick of it. I think we've ridden this, as much as we can, and there'd been memes, the sort of hello darkness, my old friend, which my children think is the best thing I've ever done. You're on YouTube. Like, oh. So that's the best thing that ever happened to them. Yeah, but that was the promo department who actually, they were brilliant. It was a really, really good idea, and it just kind of put it to bed, I think.
Oh, fantastic. Well, before we put this to bed, because we've overrun and we promised we wouldn't, and I'm very, very sorry. But Johnny, I do want to mention just almost finally to you that you wrote a superb book about Leicester City, which I know Omar's a great fan of as well. And it's your local club, isn't it, Leicester City?
It is now, Paddy. Yeah, I'm 2 miles from the ground. I can cycle there at a home game. In fact, I'll be doing that on Saturday.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Is it Saturday?
It's Sunday.
Oh, fine. No, sorry. It's
Saturday.
No, it's Saturday. Yeah,
it's Saturday.
I was going to say.
I think it is because I'm working on it.
It's Saturday.
In that case, Kelly, who's actually broadcasting the game, will be able to tell you the kickoff time. It's 5:30. So if you've got your bike, you'll be able to stay and have a cup of tea with the family before you go.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the Leicester tea is actually one of the biggest misses in lockdown. Actually, is the spread they put on at the King Power. So I'll have to have my dinner first.
Yeah. Do they still charge £1 for the tea and give it to charity?
Oh,
They used
I
to
think
in
that
the
was
old
only.
days.
I think
That was in my
you're right.
era, yes. That was
They
in
haven't
my
for a
era.
while. They haven't for a while.
No, but they do give you sweeties. They've got jars of sweeties.
Oh, I know.
Lovely,
Right.
lovely.
One day we'll do a perspective on the lures and the luxuries
The
that
sweeties
the
of the King
media are
Power.
given. I must say, a sweetie. In my day, you certainly didn't get a sweetie, and if you did, it would probably have been poisoned. But particularly at Manchester United in Fergie's day. But Jonathan, Leicester City. Just briefly. Brendan Rodgers has created a team. One, is this team potentially the equal of the title-winning side? And two, would Rodgers be a candidate for manager of the season?
Both really difficult ones because the answer is kind of like yes and no at the same time, I suppose. I mean, the title-winning team, I think, is still underrated. They won by 10 points, and and they didn't really, the kind of pressure that we thought they were going to end up under. They kind of coasted to it in the end, and that team produced, Footballer of the Year N'Golo Kante, Footballer of the Year Riyad Mahrez, Kasper Schmeichel, who I think we now understand is a world-class player. Maybe at the time wasn't seen, was still maybe seen in Peter's shadow a little bit, but I think we can see absolutely world-class goalkeeper, and Jamie Vardy. And that alone, that's before you get to like Huth and Morgan at the back, and
Drinkwater, who had a phenomenal season that earned him
had a phenomenal
transfer
season
to Chelsea.
Yeah, I think it was a tremendous team. It didn't play as good football as this current side, but what a hardened winning machine it was. Lethal on the counter attack. Lethal, yeah. So I think this, what you could say is the current team is a better footballing side, and has the potential to go higher because of the number of young players and the blueprint that Rodgers has got, the patterns of play, the passing football, which is probably as good as anything outside Manchester City in that particular style, and it can't be underestimated what an achievement it is for Leicester. 5 years on from the title, to not only have found a way to move on from it, but to now be like an established top club. That's incredible. That's an extraordinary thing for anyone to establish themselves alongside the big six.
So
I don't know the next couple do it.
So would Rodgers be at least a candidate for manager?
Well,
if Leicester finish in second place above Omar's beloved Manchester United, the
reason I kind of said, it's a difficult one, is I just think you can't go past Guardiola for all the reasons we mentioned earlier.
Fair point.
The incredible season. Apart from him, yeah.
Well, we are all looking forward to a great weekend, and I'm glad we've cleared up the question of which day the Leicester Manchester City game is. Myself,
just need to clear up which day it is today now.
And whether it's still today. We've overrun by so much. But for myself, probably the reason I got a little bit confused is that I'm so nervous. My English club is Fulham, and I'm looking forward to our visit to Villa, and even more if we are successful in that, Newcastle against Tottenham, because I see Newcastle as possibly the most vulnerable to a terminal, a conclusive leap out of trouble by us. So I'm really looking forward to that, as all other weekends. But I would like, before Omar wraps up, to thank Kelly Cates and Jonathan Northcroft for being even better than we could have dreamed of as our first guests on The Perspective. We are so grateful to you for your company. Unfortunately, there will be a price for you to pay, which somewhere down the line will be an invitation to return, but I'm sorry about that. But Omar, if you can wrap things up for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Patrick said, and thank you so much for coming on for the first podcast. We really appreciate it, and you've been an amazing guest, better than I could have imagined. So yeah, thank you so much. But yeah, that is the end of the first episode of The Perspective. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on all streaming platforms. And we will see you for the next episode, where we have two very special guests again.